Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Charles Schwab Challenge initial research show. With an exciting PGA championship in the books, we are turning our attention to Fort Worth, Texas, and the Charles Schwab Challenge. I hope you had a very successful PGA championship. You had an outright on Brooks Koepka. You used a lot of Brooks and Victor Hovland, who I was surprisingly fairly high on. All that good stuff. So jump into chat or leave it in the comments. I want to hear about your success and how well you did at the PGA Championship. It was an unmitigated disaster for yours truly. Nothing went right this weekend. I didn't get shut out. That's about the only thing I can say good about my PGA Championship performance. In fact, not a whole lot went correct this weekend at all. The PGA Championship sliced my face shaving. I mean, I just can't do anything right, apparently. So we're going to try to turn all of that around for the Charles Schwab Challenge. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. And if you are a member at Fantasy National, you can get these stats yourself. Don't have to listen to an idiot like me try to figure out how to rank live players when it's simply a major championship. You put Brooks up near the top of the rankings. It's as simple as that. So go check out Fantasy National. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I post research for the golf tournament every Monday. That will be no exception tomorrow. I have started my research for the Charles Schwab. That will be tomorrow. So if you would like to see that research, give me a follow over at Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is also where I post my daily 3 up, 3 down for baseball. That has been going on continuously now for a little while. Been doing fairly well in that. Yesterday was pretty successful. So if you would like to see some quick hitting DFS baseball recommendations, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I post my betting cards week after week on the PGA Tour. So if you would like to see my weekly betting card, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then finally, we're live. Chat's open. Again, I want to hear from you all. How was your PGA Championship? What do you think is the biggest story coming out of the PGA Championship? Do you think it's Brooks Koepka? Is it Michael Block? Is it the course? Is it live in general? I would love to hear your take from the 2023 PGA Championship. And of course, if you were successful, jump into chat. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who do well. And then what are you looking forward to for the Charles Schwab? How much do you know of Colonial? It's been a pretty regular staple on the PGA Tour for a long time now. Who do you think has the advantage here? All of that good stuff. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 Charles Schwab Challenge. And we are going to start a little differently tonight. We're going to start over at Fantasy National. The main reason being that the tournament fact sheet is not out. So I do not know of any massive changes from last year's course. But what I can tell you is that we are in Fort Worth, Texas at Colonial Country Club. I will cheat a little bit and go to these historic conditions. You see, we've been at Colonial ever since 2012 at least, and I mean much further back. It's been at Colonial ever since I can remember. Colonial is a par 70. Last year measured to 7,209 yards, so right on the cusp of hitting the short course filter in Fantasy National. However, not sure we're going to want to look at short course metrics, especially since this is a par 70, not a par 72. So it's still a fairly long course by par standards. So par 70, last year set 7,209 yards. Have not seen the official scorecard yet, but hopefully that will be out tomorrow. We are on bent grass greens again. this week. So we're going to be taking a look at bent grass greens. The greens, I believe, are fairly large, although I can't speak to that specifically. Again, no GCSA tournament fact sheet out yet, but we are on bent. We are going to be looking at probably some difficult course metrics, as we'll get into here in a little bit. And before we get too heavily into it as well, there have been 3 field changes already from the time that the field came out Friday evening. The 3 field changes: Keith Mitchell, Taylor Montgomery, and Parker Cootie have withdrawn. Parker Cootie committed to the Korn Ferry Tour event this week already and is going to keep that commitment. But Keith Mitchell and Taylor Montgomery have withdrawn. And right before I started preparing the show tonight, I did see that Michael Block has been given a sponsor's exemption into the Charles Schwab Challenge. So Michael Block is here. So a fantastic story if you follow the PGA Championship. So that is just a very, very rough overview of Colonial. But let's go ahead and look at take a look at a few of the players in the field this week. Again, the Charles Schwab is an invitational tournament, much like the Arnold Palmer, the Memorial, Genesis. It's an invitational style field, but it's not. It's generally not held in that highest regard, at least from what I've perceived of it, as the Genesis, as the Arnold Palmer, as the Memorial. But this is an invitational style field, so only 136 players, I believe, in the field this week, maybe 132. But we still have some pretty big names in the field this week. Scotty Scheffler, your tie 2 or tie runner-up for the PGA Championship. Tony Finau, Max Homa, Sung Jae, Ricky, Jordan Spieth, Justin Rose, Colin Morikawa. Some pretty big names here this week at Colonial. So let's go ahead and look at the course breakdown in Fantasy National before we start digging into some of the data for the evening. First thing I like to do when I look at scorecards and courses in general is to look and try to find where par is. I generally try to start at the 9th and 10th. And if it falls into there, it's right at average in terms of difficulty. You see par is actually the 11th most difficult hole, which would signify that it is a bit on the tougher end in terms of scoring. And we'll see that consistently throughout tonight and through the week. A little bit misleading because you do have one hole that plays remarkably easy. The opening par 5 is a gentle handshake to Colonial in the sense that it plays to about 4/10 of a shot under par, and then even the par 4 second plays to 1500ths. So the 2 easiest holes are the beginning of the tournament, and then you hit the kind of signature part of the course, the horrible horseshoe, as they call it, as you go 3, 4, and 5, 4th, 3rd, and toughest holes, quarter of a shot, 15 or 1300ths, and basically a 10th over par. You have quite a few holes that will play over par, but nothing extremely difficult, say a half a shot, 4/10 of a shot. The hardest hole is a quarter of a shot over par, but you have several holes in here: 1400ths, 1300ths, a 10th, 600ths, 900ths, 500ths, 500ths, 300ths, just considerably. They're not birdie holes. They're good holes to get par, and bogey can creep in on you if you are out of position. So when we scroll down and cheat a little bit, go to scoring distribution, there are a few birdies thanks to especially the first 2 holes, but you do have a few doubles, a few bogeys, so it plays to right about average, maybe a little bit on the difficult end. And as far as the length of the course, even though this is only a par 70, it is still fairly long for a par 70. You do have a 635-yard par 5, and you have several long par 3s, including the very difficult 247-yard par 3. You've got a couple of longer par 3s of 199, 192, and 190, so long par 3s. Also going to be something that we are going to want to look at this week. But there's a look at the scorecard. If we go on down and look at Colonial from a graphical standpoint, you see the top 10 finishers, a pretty normal looking distribution here in terms of strokes gained, approach being the most important, then putting. Off the tee is outweighing the around the green, giving this a ball striking lean. And for your top fives, much the same in terms of distribution and distance between each shot type, or importance in between each shot type. The approach rises above 1 for your top 5 finishers. The off the tee does distance itself a little bit from the around the green. And then for your winners, off the tee really kind of stands out in terms of against around the green, giving this a pretty decent ball striking lean. But we are definitely going to be looking at some bent grass putting as well. As you can see, it's just been a consistent metric that putting doesn't jump for the winners, doesn't decline, anything like that. It's just been pretty consistent. So we're going to want to look at some bent grass putting for sure. But again, some more approach and off the tee this week for Colonial. Top 10s in terms of average strokes gained by hole by par, pretty even. Again, don't be misled by your y-axis over here. This is a pretty even distribution between these, between the 3 different holes by par, which would make a lot of sense, especially because there are only 2 par 5s. So the 4s and the 5s pretty similar. Par 3s slightly lagging behind for the top 10s. We move to the top 5s. Par 5s actually gain a bit in importance, which is a little surprising to me, but it is there. The par 5s do gain in importance for the top 5s, and then for the winners, pretty even and pretty similar looking distribution around the 5s and 10s as well. So we'll have to see if indeed the 2 par 5s are that important. You see a decent eagle rate here on number 1, 2.5%. Not a very good eagle rate on the 11th. It's generally a 3-shot hole, but good birdie rate, obviously, at 28%, and then 44.5% for the first. So we'll see if par 5s are indeed really carrying that much weight, or if there's a little bit of some misleading data, I suppose. Best way to say that. But I do get the feeling that the par 4s are going to be very, very important. Again, this week being a par 70, you'll get 2 extra par 4s. So we move to the hole composition. We talked about a little bit of this already, but 3 par 3s from 175 to 200. In fact, 3 measure 190 to 200. You have 190, 192, and 199 on the scorecard, and then you have the extremely long 247-yard par 3. The par 4s, you do not have any drivable par 4s here, but you do have 2 short from 350 to 4. The majority of your par 4s, 7 of the 12, come from 400 to 450, and then 3 par 4s from 450 to 5. Your par 5s are in between 550 and 650, split evenly on either side of 600. So 1 from 550 to 6, 1 from 6 to 650. So again, especially tomorrow in the Data Dive show, we will try and see if the 400 to 450 is the carrying par 4 length here at Colonial. Approach shots, even though this is a fairly long course for a par 70, you see the majority of approach shots fall between 125 to 150 and 150 to 175. In fact, a quarter of the approach shots come from 150 to 175. So again, in the data dive tomorrow, we will see if these two ranges, particularly this one, is something that we want to focus on this week for the Charles Schwab. Historic cut line, you see it's been right on the edge of average and difficult, right at +2 the past couple of years. It dipped all the way to -1 in 2020. It's been as high as +5 before, but generally you're hovering right in this +2 range. That's been the most common cut number. Sometimes it can play to +1 and then the +3s, but generally you're hovering right in this +2, which will put it right on the edge of average and difficult, depending on what the wind is doing. And of course, we'll start tomorrow's show. I should say, we normally start the Data Dive show with Wind Finder. We'll start tomorrow's show, hopefully, with the GCSA tournament fact sheet, and then move to Wind Finder. But historic cut line, usually around +2. Scoring distribution, we already looked at this, but just to recap it, fair amount of birdies, 18%, but the bogeys and the doubles, when stacked on top of each other, roughly about the same amount as birdies, maybe even a little bit higher. The Eagles bar, non-existent, only really on the first hole. So generally plays to about average, maybe even a little bit on the difficult end because of the amount of doubles. Driving accuracy, something that will be very common this week. Driving accuracy less here than the average tour event. These fairways can get pretty narrow. They can get hard to hit, especially with the wind. So we might want to look at some difficult to hit fairway metrics. Green and regulation percentage also less than the average tour event. But scrambling is higher, meaning players are more successful scrambling here than the average tour event. That's probably leading to the mitigating around the green factors across the top 10s. And this is the fact that scrambling is pretty easy here. 3 putts, really non-existent, so I could be incorrect in remembering that these greens are large. They might be small, which would lead to, again, greens being harder to hit, less 3 putts if they are indeed small. So hopefully that GCSA tournament fact sheet is out tomorrow. But something that you would think about initially, probably, if driving accuracy is less, you probably think that distance is further, just because players might not care about hitting the fairway. In fact, it's the opposite. So this is a very, very difficult test or golf course off the tee. Distance is lower and hitting the fairways is lower. So we're going to see just how much, if distance matters, if fairways matter, and all of that. We'll do that again very heavily tomorrow in the Data Dive show, but very difficult test for players off the tee as distance and fairways are less. And then green and regulation proximity, a lot closer than the average tour event. You got 25.75 versus 29.17. So all 3 of these, proximity, 3 putts, and green and regulation percentage, are leading to the fact that these greens would be small. So we'll see, or at least hopefully we'll see by tomorrow. But there's a look at Colonial in terms of a scorecard and graphical view in Fantasy National. We will now turn our attention back to the players in the field this week. And let's go ahead and take a look at some off the tee metrics, especially since we just saw that the distance and the accuracy are both lower here. Looks to be a very, very difficult test for players off the tee. So in 2023, your top off the tee players have been Scotty Scheffler, Luke List, Victor Hovland, Hayden Buckley, Brian Harmon, Sung Jae, Taylor Moore, Cameron Davis, Garrick Higo, and Carson Young. Again, skipping Keith Mitchell. He is withdrawn, and the PGA Championship data is not in yet, so this will be probably updated tomorrow, or the ordering will probably be different tomorrow after the PGA Championship is loaded. Of course, we want to look at some strokes gain approach. So your top strokes gain approach players, this calendar year. In the field this week, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Colin Morikawa, Ricky Fowler, Tom Hoge, Akshay Bhatia, Max Homa, Nate Lashley, Jordan Spieth, and Scott Piercy. And lastly, before we do the bent greens, let's go ahead and take a look at the historic conditions. As you see, Colonial has always been classified as bent, but I want to get a feel for green speeds. So every single round the past 2 years has been fast. They did slow it down in 2020, 3 rounds of average and a fast. But generally you're looking at fast bent greens. You might have a year where it is average, but generally you're looking at some fast bent greens. And you see scoring relative to par, generally difficult, sometimes average. It's hovering right on that average to difficult line. You might get an easy round, especially if the wind dies down. But most often you are going to be in the average to difficult, maybe even flirting into the difficult range. And it looks like it's been toughened up the past couple of years. But I really wanted to see some green speeds here. So we are going to look at fast bent greens, and we're going to have to expand the timeline. Let's go all the way back to 2021, or the beginning of 2021. So your top putters on fast bent greens in the past 2.5 years: Christian Bezuidenhout, Alex Noren, Justin Lauer, Sam Burns, Brendan Todd, Justin Rose, Denny McCarthy, Maverick McNeely, Ricky Fowler, and Eric Compton are your top 10 in terms of fast bent green putters. One more thing that we want to look at, again, we just saw in the historic conditions that this is pretty difficult, or it's toughened up considerably over the past few years. So your top total performers when a round is difficult in the field this week, going back to the beginning of 2021: Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Sung Jae, Max Homa, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, Denny McCarthy, and Chris Kirk. All right, so there's a look at some key metrics or overview statistics, if you will, for Colonial and the Charles Schwab this week. Not sure I want to do any real digging, to be honest with you. Just because we haven't seen the GCSA tournament fact sheet and all that. We normally don't go too heavy into the data. We save that for tomorrow night. But I don't want to give you just those. So let's do proximity. Just in case proximity does have a bearing. So the most common approach shot, let me remind myself, I believe it's the 150 to 175 is the most common approach shot. So that's what we'll look at here. Bring this to the beginning of 2023. So in this calendar year, your top proximity players from 150 to 175 in the field this week: Scott Piercy, Emiliano Grillo, Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, Siwoo Kim, Eric Van Rooyen, Russell Knox, Adams Vincent, and Tom Hoge. All right. Last thing I would like to do in Fantasy National, let's go ahead and go to the Tournament History tab. And because Colonial has held the Charles Schwab Challenge for seemingly eons, we can take a look at prior course performance here. And we see our top strokes gained total player in the field this week is Jordan Spieth. That's going to be a pretty common theme, as this was his worst performance at the Charles Schwab. He's had numerous editions even before 2018. He's a former champion here back in 2016, I believe it was. He's had a runner-up, several top tens. Jordan Spieth just loves this place. He always plays very well here. Your defending champion is Sam Burns, your winner last year. Now, he missed the cut in his first edition, playing in 2018, then goes T31, and then wins. Did take 2 years away off from the Charles Schwab, but he's your defending champion. 2021. Oh, great. Now it's escaping me. I didn't think they were in the... Oh, Jason Kokrak. Jason Kokrak was your winner in 2021. Of course, not here because he's at Live. 2020 was Daniel Berger. 2019 was Kevin Na. So a wide variety of players that have won here at Colonial. Sam Burns, a lot in the putting. Kevin Na, putting. Jason Kokrak was more ball striking. Daniel Berger was all in the irons. So a different mix of players who have won here, but some other players who have played Colonial well in the past 5 years. Tony Finau, your number 2 stroke game player. He's got 2 top 5s and another top 20 to his name. Justin Rose, your winner in 2018. He did miss the cut last year, but has some stellar performances. Emiliano Grillo, 4 for 5, several high finishes as well. So other notable names, Colin Morikawa, 3 for 3. C.T. Payne has played well here. Brendan Todd has 2 top 10s, a miscut, but 2 top 10s in the past 2 years. Sungjae, all or nothing. He's got a top 10, a top 15, and 2 miscuts. Russell Knox has played well. 3 top 20s, 2 miscuts. So a lot more all or nothing. Davis Riley was T4 last year. Scotty Scheffler's 2 for 3 here. So good list of names there of players who have played well at Colonial. The other end of the spectrum, players who haven't played well for whatever reason here. Adam Schenk, 2 for 5, but a middling and a clunker of a made cut. Sam Ryder, 0 for 3. Nick Taylor, Harry Higgs, K.H. Lee, your used to be 2-time defending champion at Valero, just up the road in McKinney, Texas, but not playing well at Fort Worth, 1 for 3. Tom Hoagie, 2 for 5. Again, the emphasis on iron play, and yet still not faring well. Doug Gim, 1 for 4. Siwoo has not played this event well. Denny McCarthy, Kramer Hickok. Ben On, 3 for 3, but nothing above or better than a T50. Nate Lashley has struggled. Alnani. So there's a list of names of players who have not played the Charles Schwab and at Colonial very well. That's going to do our Fantasy National portion. Let's go ahead and move to Microsoft Excel. We'll take a look at Charles Schwab and Colonial against other courses very quickly tonight. But the more interesting part will be done tomorrow, at least in my opinion, where we get into the actual detail of the Charles Schwab. But against other full field courses, the Charles Schwab off the tee, looking like it is not as important again for the top 30. So it'll be interesting to see when we go through some prior leaderboards, the fact that the distance is a lot less, the fairways are harder to hit, maybe just off the tee doesn't matter. We'll see. Approach, 9% more important. Around the green, just 2%, but again, we saw throughout the course breakdown, top 10s, 5s, and winners, around the green was pretty suppressed in value, and then putting slightly less. We also saw this in the, I've been messing that up because I did not change the view for you all. My apologies. So you see off the tee, not very important. Approach, 9%. Around the green and putting, slightly on, or close to average full field course, but on different sides. Driving distance, we saw this in the course breakdown, just not important at all. Almost 50% less important. Now the fairways, hitting the fairways for the players that finish in the top 30, there you go. That's showing that there is a premium on a portion of off the tee. It looks like it's in fairways, and these good drives gained. So 2 pretty big numbers there. Greens, slightly more important. Sand saves might be something to look at as well, depending on when we get the GCSA tournament fact sheet, the number of bunkers and all that. So I'll be interested to see that tomorrow as well. Perhaps hand saves could be something. Moving into scoring, normally on courses that are difficult, I tend to think about bogey avoidance first if pars are good scores, but it's showing that, in fact, it's birdies. So perhaps getting birdies on difficult courses, which would make a little bit of sense considering the data that we saw, in the sense that this does hover right on that cut or cusp of difficult and average. So perhaps it is birdies that we're going to be looking at. Par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Par 3s, pretty mitigated. And we saw that in the course breakdown graphically, and I was a little surprised by that, especially since, this is only a par 70, so generally par 3s get a lot of importance. But it doesn't seem so. But you see the specific range where 3 of the 4 par 3s fall is heightened in importance against other full field courses. So perhaps we're just going to be looking at the specific range of par 3s. Par 4s, as I would expect, have heightened significance since there's 2 extra par 4s, so 17% more important. And you see the prevalent length of par 4 here. There are 7 par 4s from 400, 450, almost 50% more important than the average full field course. So really liking what I'm seeing data-wise there, trying to map out or imagine how or matching the data we saw from Fantasy National and now here. Par 5s, pretty mitigated, actually. Even though it was the leading strokes gained by a hole by par, very mitigated for your top 30 finishers. However, the 1 par 5 that's from 600 to 650 is right on full field course average, so I'm not sure how we're feeling about that. That'll be something we'll want to investigate tomorrow when we go to the detail page and check out prior leaderboards. But definitely the par 4s and par 4s 400, 450 is a good way to start your research this week, I believe. Last thing we'll take a look at, proximity. Total prox is only 1% more important, but the most important range, again, 150 to 175, the most common approach shot length, less important than the average full field course. So again, another case where we're going to have to go through the prior leaderboards and see what the deal is there. But there's a look at Colonial and the Charles Schwab against other full field courses. Last thing we'll check for this evening, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter show, especially with no GCSA tournament fact sheet. Prior course performance for the players in the field this week, specifically here at Colonial. So you see Davis Riley last year, T4. Hey, Logan, thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Skin of my teeth, I cashed 4 of 6. Hey, the only thing I can say about my performance at the PGA Championship was that I didn't get shut out. But that's about all I can say. I had 0 6 of 6s. I had 0 5 of 6s. I had a couple of decent suggestions. Again, Victor Hovland being fairly unique. I was pretty high on Hovland. I felt pretty strongly about Keegan Bradley. He didn't, he kind of fell off on Sunday, but overall he played well. But the majority of my PGA Championship, I went with Abraham Answer. That was a disaster. Gary Woodland hurt. Matt Fitzpatrick didn't play well. I thought he would. So, and of course, I knew going into it that I was going to fade Brooks, and it was a dangerous game because it's big game Brooks, and I lost. So, nothing about my PGA Championship was all that great, but I'm glad to hear that you cashed. Much better than me. So congratulations on that. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. And hopefully we can turn this around for the Charles Schwab this week. But again, as a reminder, this is grabbing. Hey Bruce, thanks for jumping in chat. Kepka saved my DFS line. Yeah, so Hovland, I was pretty high on. I was nowhere near Koepka. I was willing to lose. I lost. So glad to hear that you had an amount of success. Brooks, Cantley, Svensson, Burns, Neiman, Højgaard. Yeah, I was high on Neiman as well. Neiman didn't play well. Clearly should have went with Connors in that price slot. Højgaard, I talked Højgaard up at the beginning of the week last week, and then by Wednesday, when I looked into the rankings and then did the DFS Tactics show, I had jumped off of him because his metrics for what played or what I thought was going to play specifically at Oak Hill didn't line up well. So I jumped off Højgaard, fortunately, assuming that's Nikolai. I don't know if it's Nikolai or Erasmus. I was high on Nikolai at the beginning of the week. Svensson, Burns missed the cut. Svensson played well. Cantley was solid. Brooks, of course. So, yeah, okay. Bruce, how did your round 3, round 4, and weekend showdown lineups go? I feel like I didn't have... I don't feel like I did terrible. Looks like Jaeger did well. That was a pivot, yep. But how did your showdown lineups go, Bruce? I feel like I was a little bit better in that regard. Although Scheffler still played well. Hovland played well. There was one player I was pretty high on that I know didn't play well. I think Finau. But I felt like I got Straka was really good. I was really high on Straka for showdown or weekend golf. So hopefully you had some success over the weekend, Bruce, if you played round 3 and round 4. But as a reminder, as we come back to the Charles Schwab and looking at performance specifically here at Colonial, this is that same strokes gained total or tournament history tab from Fantasy National brought to Microsoft Excel, splitting out the performance in their specific or whatever associated metric for the past 5 years. I only go back 5 years. Golfers change. That's just more transparency and FYI. This isn't career. This is just for the past 5 years. Like I said, Spieth's played this event 10, 11, 12 times. I just go back to the past 5 years. But number of events, their average finish, how many times they missed the cut. And so, for example, in the past 5 years, Jordan Spieth has averaged 1.8 off the tee at Colonial, 3/10 on approach, 2.3 around the green, 4 putting, etc., etc. This is a way to get a feel for the players who have played this event very, very well, to see what they've done well. And I'm actually going to do the players that have played it more than 50% of the time the past 5 years. So anyone who's played 3, 4, and 5 times the past 5 years here at Colonial, let's see where they are performing the best. So we'll go down to probably players that have averaging a top 40. Again, doesn't sound great, but if you are averaging a top 40 over 4 years, that's pretty darn good. And we have plenty of former champions of this event in this small little data set here. Jordan Spieth, your winner in 2016. Justin Rose won in 2018. I believe Chris Kirk won this in 2015. So we've got 3 winners here in this small set of data of the players who have averaged a top 40. So of those players, these elite finishers at Colonial, 1.2 and off the tee. We've got a 1.5 in approach. Round the green is a 0.7 and a 1.7. So putting is taking the lead here, but you have a couple of spike performances or 2 players that are heads and tails above the rest of these in putting. Brendan Todd, always a good putter. Jordan Spieth, known for his putting, especially 2018, 19, and so on. So no surprise there, but the preference is in the ball striking Although you do have a huge outlier here in Morikawa too, so maybe we'll have some heavy emphasis in putting. Be interested to see how we go tomorrow. Moving along into the driving tab, see the distance doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter for these players that have had these elite finishes. It hasn't hurt by any means. Max Homa, Finau, but you don't have to have it. Brendan Todd never going to be long off the tee. Chris Kirk not long. Rory Sabatini, Brian Harman, these guys are not long off the tee. So it's just not mandatory here. Instead, you've got Jordan Spieth, who's been seemingly not hitting many fairways at all, but everyone else in the top 40 here has been pretty darn successful, or at least field average, at hitting fairways. And in fact, look at the the good drives gained. So that might be where we start our assumptions leading into the week, is looking at some good drives gained here at Colonial. And here's that particular statistic of players who've performed the best here at Colonial. Burns burned me this week. Hope he can bounce back. Yeah. Burns is always interesting. I had my reservations about Burns at the PGA just because he can get so wayward. Now, the putter can always save him, but with as difficult as I knew the rough was going to be, or I had heard throughout the week that the rough was going to be so penal, Burns is not accurate. So I was pretty shy on Burns. I did use him once because he was so unique, hoping to catch lightning in a bottle, but I did not think it was going to set up well for him at Oak Hill. But there's a look at the driving tab of players who have played well consistently at Colonial. We move to scoring, and again, for these players who have averaged the top 40, all but one have been positive in birdies gained. Now, I would normally think if a course is difficult that you would want to look at bogey avoidance if pars are good scores. But again, according to the data here, it looks like it's going to be the birdies gained. This is a 2.0. That's a 1.6. Now, only one player is negative there, but it's a much deeper negative. And your spike performance isn't as high either. So, looking like we could be looking at some birdies gained. That's where looking like we're going to start this week, especially going into tomorrow at the Data Dive Show, looking at birdies gained. All right, par threes. We saw that this was pretty mitigated. However, remember that 3 of the 4 par threes measured to this length here. You got Morikawa, who's spiked at that range. Sabatini, Rose is spiked at that range. Sorry, I didn't mean to go all the way over. I wanted to keep this. Par threes just don't seem all that important. I mean, this is only a 0.4. You look at the par fours, it's a 4.3. So, I mean, 10 times the importance. And then the par fives, I know it's off your screen, but the par fives are a 0.4. So the threes and the fives are matching. The heavy emphasis is in the par fours. But the 175 to 200 par threes are seemingly the most important range of par threes. The par fours, the shorter par fours are where the dominance is at. No one, okay, so this is pretty telling. Nobody who has averaged a top 40 finish the past 5 years, who's played consistently at Colonial, is negative in terms of strokes gained par 4 at the 2 short lengths of par 4s from 350 to 4 and 400 to 450. This is a 1.9. That's a 1.6. So pretty telling set of data here for the players who have these elite finishes at Colonial. But it seems his form hasn't been as good as Rose. Yeah, Kirk, I feel like I was a little high on Kirk. I know I was really high on him for Showdown due to the fact that the wind was really supposed to pick up on Saturday. I can't remember where he was in my rankings overall for the PGA Championship. I feel like I was middling on him. I can't remember, to be honest with you. I've slept since then and tried to forget it. But Rose was decently high. I thought he was going to be popular, so I wasn't quite there. Again, I was more on Neiman in the upper sevens. Who else was in the upper sevens? Connors I used a little bit. Keegan I used a lot in the upper sevens, so I just didn't quite get down to Rose, and that's why I'm not cashing much this week. But there's the par fours. Then par fives, yeah, just not a whole lot of importance here. Not a whole lot of importance at all across any of these specific lengths. So looks like our heavy emphasis to start the week needs to be in these shorter par fours. 17 and 18. I mean, 17 and 18 killed a lot of people. That was just a tough course. It was a fun spectator event. I thought the course was fair. I thought it was absolutely fair. If you played well, there were good scores to be had. But you had to be on top of your game, and that's what the PGA Championship should be. It shouldn't be a ridiculous, you hit good shots or play at your best and be even par. I don't think that's fun. I like the way Oak Hill was set up. All right, lastly for this evening, we'll take a look at proximity. Again, the most important range, or the most prevalent range, according to Fantasy National, 25% of your approach shots come from 150 to 175, but quite a few of these players are negative in this range. Quite a few players. I mean, in fact, really only Colin Morikawa is the top, or is elite at that range here, specifically at Colonial. Now, you do have some good total procs performances of these guys that are in the top 40, but I don't know how I feel about total procs being something, because total procs was much shorter or much closer to the hole than the average full field course or the average tour event. So I don't know how I feel about that. We've got a lot of interesting things that we'll want to look at for tomorrow. I will bring back every single player that is in the field this week who has played Colonial in the past 5 years and let you get a feel for that. A little bit of a shorter show this evening, again with no GCSA tournament fact sheet. I figured it was going to be a little bit. Hopefully that is out tomorrow and we can get a better feel for how Colonial is set up this year. Again, last year it is going to be a par 70, I can tell you that, but last year was set at 7,209 yards, so not quite short course, right on that cusp, but I don't feel comfortable using short course metrics because this is a par 70, so it's still a fairly long par 70. So I don't feel comfortable using short course metrics. Hopefully we'll get an idea on bunkerage, acres of fairway, stimp meter, all of that, although I'm pretty sure this will be fast bent. But that's going to do it for the initial research show. In the comments, again, let me know what you thought the storyline of the PGA Championship was. Was it Brooks? Was it Michael Block? Do you think the course was the main takeaway from the 2023 PGA Championship? Would love to hear the community's thoughts on the PGA Championship. Logan and Bruce, thanks for jumping in chat. Pretty good insights. I'm glad to hear that you all had a modicum of success. I certainly did not. I cashed one lineup, so I didn't get shut out, but that's about all I'll say for my performance at the PGA Championship. It wasn't very good, so we're going to try and turn that around this week for the Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial Country Club. So thanks again for jumping in chat, and thanks to everyone out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting on videos, subscribing to the channel. I always appreciate it. I love doing what I do, which is looking at sports statistics and trying to win a little money in the process. So for all of the wagers that you had made this past week for the PGA Championship, for all the DFS contests you entered this past week at the PGA Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.